have 2 minutes. Very good. Right, Heiko Khoo will be our next candidate for the Workers' Party.
Okay, my name's Heiko Khoo. I've been speaking at Speaker's Corner since 1985, the end of 1985. I've been involved in political life since I was 17 years of age. I'm 60 years of age now. I joined the Labour Party in 1980 and was expelled from the party with a letter last year. I've been expelled before. I was expelled when Jeremy Corbyn was first standing. They expelled me. The machine decided that I was some kind of Maoist, and then when Jeremy Corbyn won, the NEC realised that this was a pack of lies. They'd had an army of people employed to purge the party in advance of Jeremy Corbyn's victory. And then when Jeremy Corbyn, I participated in his campaign to get elected. When he got elected, I supported Jeremy Corbyn's campaign, but I noticed quite early on that he was being sabotaged. He was being sabotaged by the internal machine inside the Labour Party. And this internal machine has got links that are not really connected with the Labour movement. They're connected with big business, they're connected with state interests, they're connected with Israel, they're connected with big power interests which are opposed to the Labour movement. And we did our attempt to change the party, but unfortunately there was a coup d'etat inside the party in 2017, which Keir Starmer participated in, and many others participated in. Remember the coup?
Yeah.
They all resigned one day. All the shadow cabinet resigned. They all like, we're out, we're finished. Jeremy Corbyn, we can't tolerate it anymore. And then Jeremy won again with a thumping majority. And I believe he made a big mistake. And his big mistake was not to call for mandatory reselection of all MPs across the whole country. In that way, we could have made the party and the mood amongst the actual activists in the party, and Labour became the biggest party in the whole of Europe during that time. 600,000 members, enthusiastic members. And actually, when Fleur stood in 2019, I saw that, what's his name, Owen Jones, he put out a tweet and he said, 700 people have turned up for canvassing in South France. Unheard of, he said. And this was, of course, the wave of Corbyn. These were the people who supported Jeremy Corbyn's ideas, coming out enthusiastically to bring members of Parliament into power and to try and defend what was an excellent manifesto, actually, in 2019. And then after Jeremy Corbyn resigned, Keir Starmer put himself forward, having sneaked himself into the leadership and played a clever, cunning, waiting game. And then he moved for the attack, abandoned every policy he stood for and attacked Jeremy Corbyn, ousted him, and then purged the party of everyone who disagrees. And then he says that's the criteria for getting elected. That's the criteria of a traitor and a saboteur of the Labour movement who is not defending the Labour movement, is defending the interests opposed to the Labour movement. Yeah, I think that shops, when they're empty, should be requisitioned. There should be no rates on those shops for a period of time in which small businesses can develop those shops, or cooperatives can develop those shops. And they should be the type of shops in modern times which constitute something different. Something different means artisanal, community, people-led initiatives that allow people to create something flourishing and different. And something different brings you to the high street. You don't go to the high street to see the same shops all the time, everywhere. That's the Americanization of the Mao-type society everywhere in the world. And those places that are successful, Notting Hill Gate, the marketplace in Camden, the marketplace in Brixton, those are genuine, thriving areas that bring people in. And to be honest with you, Putney lacks anything like that. I was just walking down the street here, there's a building there on the high street, big building, and it's got a sign up, Ambrica in the window. I don't know if you're familiar with these things, but these things are called guardian companies. And guardian companies basically have used this gap in the law. They get control over buildings, they cut the rates that are paid to central government, or to local government and central government, split between the two, And then they rent out on slum landlord conditions to people and put them in there. The building opposite, the pub opposite, the blacked out building, that's run by a company called Oakshaw. They do exactly the same thing. That's been empty for years, packed out with people in a slum landlord condition. Nothing's done about it. They're not even legal.
Thank you.
I think councils should be democratically controlled, not just controlled by bureaucrats and businesses who are lobbying officials full-time. You have people, I've been involved in various council campaigns in councils, particularly in Southwark area, and basically big businesses come in, lobby the council officials who hide behind, smart suits and their office power, and then they manipulate the tenants to do what they want. And if the tenants reject something, then they just keep coming back and back and back again and again and again, persuading them, buying off a few people, pushing some people one way, pushing people another way in order to get their way. Then they bring in a few consultants. If a tenants committee rejects what they say, then they have another consultant group come and investigate the tenants committee. And in that way, the people are disempowered. I believe people need to be empowered to take control over their lives. And if that means they want the mould removed and they set their priorities as to what they want, then they hold meetings, discuss these things and compel councillors to do what they want. And if the councillors don't do what they want, remove them from office and elect others. I'm in agreement that the issue is national. What we need is rent controls, strict rent controls to be enforced by council officers who would come around and impose them. Second thing, we can make an inventory of all the empty buildings in all the constituency, as well as across the whole of the city. We can start with constituency and then requisition those buildings and turn those buildings either into housing or into things that are used for the community. As to regard council house building, I believe that the programme should be launched on a nationwide basis to make sure that every person at 8 years of age is guaranteed a council flat at 18 years of age, and a council flat at low rent with permanent tenancies. We need to return to society where people have stability in their lives, based on cheap housing, based on quality housing, and then the rest of the society will follow from that. The community life follows from that, instead of people constantly moving from one place to another. I've only really had dealings in Roehampton about 2015. I was sent over there by Jeremy Corbyn's team to make a film about housing and regeneration. And essentially what people wanted was a refurbishment of their estate. They didn't want things knocked down, they didn't want things changed, they liked their community, but it was being left to rot. And that's the case all over the country. They were trying to make alliances with different council campaigns across the country, where basically big corporations were using councils as mechanism to squeeze resources out of the government. And that's the truth of the matter, right across the country and right across the different spectrums of national resources are just being transferred and siphoned off to the private sector. And basically people need to have control over their lives, which means engagement, such as you have today at this meeting. That's the type of level of engagement you need on a consistent basis to overturn decisions. An MP can't do that. An MP can only, if you like, appear temporarily to campaign for something, and then they've got 100 other things they've got to do. So it's all the MP can do is add a face to support you, but I would certainly do that. We need a society that encourages people to have children, that welcomes children, that treats them as a beautification of our earth, as the meaning of our life, as the reproduction of our species. And as such, we must provide childcare, creches, and all the facilities required to help raise and encourage and nurture a new generation. And the reason why we've got a cost of living crisis is because the world is controlled by a tiny handful of companies. BlackRock and Vanguard control vast resources across the planet. They control tech, pharma, the military, the banking system, and they utilise their resources on a global scale against the mass of the people of the planet. The truth of the matter is, half of the world earns less than $2 a day, 8 people own more wealth than half of the world's population. And those are dated statistics. Under COVID, resources were transferred to tech and pharma. Under the war in Ukraine, resources were transferred to the military, and there was a collapse in living standard as a consequence of a war that we've got nothing to do with. I do not support the war in Ukraine. I believe we should never have supported it. We should not be arming Ukraine. We should end the war as soon as we can. Thank you. It's a double-edged sword with the police at the moment. In the last 5 years, I've been arrested 7 times and compensated by the police for all of those 7 arrests, or awaiting one fine or one compensation. I was arrested for what? I was arrested for walking on the street, for speaking at Speaker's Corner, for riding a bicycle to escape from attacks from people. I was arrested for basically these absurd COVID regulations that were imposed on society without any justification. When there's crime in shops, you can guarantee that a lot of the crime that's taking place is because 1, people are poor, 2, because now you don't have any cashiers. You've got these stupid machines there, and we're trained like dogs to use these machines, or digitisation, and also the mobile phones. People plunder and rob these sort of objects of desire that actually are objects of control over us. And therefore I'm asking that people, and the other aspect to it is that we have to purge the Metropolitan Police of these killers and rapists who are inside there. 800 coppers in the Metropolitan Police, there's not that many of them in the Metropolitan Police, were charged with some kind of serious criminal offence after the Sarah Everard event. So we have to purge the police, make sure they're under democratic control, and the community needs to control policing, and not cameras and not technology. I use this for a more general question on education. I think there should be lifelong learning for everybody. Everybody should be able to go to study at university, no matter what age they are, and get finance to do so. Just the same as I did when I was 18. I went to university, I got a grant to study at university, I could live on that grant, I could study for free. That's what we need. And once you've got prospects for people, then the whole society changes. As regards private education, I'm in favour of public education, but public education needs to serve the people, instead of the sort of psychotic lunacy that we have at the moment, where technology is being pushed as a tendency to drive over everything. And that was worst of all in this last 5 years during the COVID crisis, when they made children stay at home in totally unequal situations, when they had totally no risk of passing on any illnesses or catching any illnesses that were going to kill them. It was a complete lie we were told about this question. They lost the whole society at home, destroyed the education system at every single level of society, and then they claim that the technology they used then is now the mechanism for the future. It is not. Education is about people to people. I'm not opposed to PR, but the fundamental question of power is slightly different to that. Power is exercised by global economic interests. On a national basis, you have the representatives of them and some national economic actors. They lobby government and tell them pretty much what to do. They can pick between one or the other. The reality is Parliament is a talking shop to represent the interests of big business. And whether Labour's in power or the Tories in power, 2 cheeks of the same arse, as we say, that's what's going to happen. They will represent the same people. And therefore the way to challenge that goes right back to the levelist debates that took place here in 1647, where they said, if we have the right to vote, if we have all human beings treated as rational representatives or people created by God, able to exercise their power, then they will ask the question, does property control or do the people control? That's the real question. Gaza illustrates the barbarism which our society is now producing. 100,000 people injured or maimed, something like 40,000 people killed, 70% of them women or children. This is barbarism, financed and supported by Britain, America and Europe. The so-called democratic, which reveals that the march of democracy is a fraud, which is what I've been trying to explain during the course of this meeting, of this hustings today. We have a fraudulent system of power in which, when the real face is revealed, barbarism appears. Keir Starmer, with his woodenness, his frozenness, his inability to take a position on anything, is one thing he takes a position on. Is absolute support for Israel, no matter what they do. No matter what he says, oh, we support ceasefire, we support two-state, we support Palestine. He does not support Palestine. He supports the Israel lobby. And anyone who claims, these people who claim that they're defending the rights of the people, the truth of the matter is, Israel and Palestinians must live as one people with equal rights in a single state, not in a second state like a concentration camp, which is what people are proposing for the two-state solution in reality. The idea that the climate is changing in some catastrophic form, as far as I can make out, having studied the question for some time now, is a corporate fraud. It's a corporate fraud. That doesn't mean climate doesn't change. Climate change is always. And climate mitigation is important because we have to be worried about floods, we have to be worried about disasters, we have to be worried about volcanoes. I had a girlfriend who was killed in an earthquake. You know, these things happen. And they're terrible things to happen. We need to mitigate those things. But there is a fraudulent campaign by an international lobby to present CO2, which is the gas of life, as a poison that destroys the Earth. The reality is, all life on Earth is entirely dependent on CO2. And for them to have turned CO2 into an enemy illustrates how mad the world has become. Yeah. I want to mention something that hasn't come up today, and that's the thing that really affected us all in the last 5 years. The first thing that happened after Boris Johnson was elected was the crisis over so-called COVID pandemic. The reality is, and I'm an expert on Chinese studies, I've got a PhD in Chinese studies, I've followed very carefully what happened. You can look on the website putneyworkers.org and you'll see a link to my Substack where I went into great detail. It is even being read by the chief pandemic, guy in charge of the pandemic response in China. He's reading the document I'm writing. I also did an interview with Wolfgang Bodar, the guy who exposed the swine flu pandemic as an international corporate fraud, and that was accepted by the European Union at their 2010 meeting by 58 votes to 2. They accepted that the swine flu was a fraud carried out by Big Pharma, mobilising the WHO and manipulating them for their own interests. And it was Paul Flynn, a Labour MEP, who exposed this in the European Parliament. All that was forgotten when COVID came along. And suddenly, the whole world, under command of a pandemic preparation network run by Bill Gates, CEPI, and Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, who control the finances of WHO, imposed a totalitarian dictatorship on most of the world for a period on and off of 2 years. And that dictatorship, it fuzzled our minds up. We were scared to hug our mother, scared to be with your children, scared to walk on the streets. That psychological manipulation of society is the worst crime that's been committed in modern times. And it is that has prepared society for accepting the barbarism, one of the war in Ukraine, and second now of the ultimate destruction of humanity, and that is the barbarity that we are seeing in Gaza, supported by the Tories and backed by the Labour Party. We must stand up against this, begin to take control of it. I don't expect you to agree with everything I say. On the contrary, I want you to disagree with what I say, whereas they want you to agree and nudge you to agree with everything they say. And everything they say in reality is to serve the interests of a tiny handful of capitalist companies that have seized control of the world. People need control themselves over society.